right, that was the curriculum. So we went over what you should take, how it depends on what school you want to go to, how your GPA matters, and how it's not the only thing that matters. Now let's talk about experiences. What you're doing is you're proving to people that you know what you're getting into and that you're a decent human being. Okay, first, if you are going to do some humanitarian work, some volunteering or something like that, do it because you care and you're interested. If you are just doing it to check a box to get into med school, first of all, you're not really serving your community and accomplishing the goal. And second of all, people can really tell. If you love what you're doing, your passion will be evident in your essays and your rec letters. And so it is something that you should do that you really care about. You should keep track of your hours, even if you're not checking the box, because they will ask you directly how many hours you spent there doing that. Get to know your supervisors. If you're shadowing a doctor, distinguish yourself to them, right? Be professional at all times in all of your circumstances. Okay. Even if you're working in a soup kitchen and you need to be just humble and kind to all kinds of people, you still want to maintain the utmost respect for your fellow human being. Okay. The reason that I say don't think of your experiences as volunteering is because that's a very confusing term. It doesn't matter whether you're paid or whether you're doing it unpaid. There are different sorts of experiences. So for instance, you could get clinical experience, and even though you're paid, it totally counts as clinical experiences. It's not about volunteering or not being paid, okay? Your clinical experiences, high school experiences don't count. The clock starts over when you get to college. You should try shadowing, especially shadowing a doctor or a professional that's in the group that you're in, okay? In what your interest is in. Try to be working in the clinic if you can, paid or unpaid. Patient contact, what does that even mean? There's more in that link about what patient contact is, right? And again, you can work or you can be doing it as a community service. That's clinical experience. It's about having contact with patients and working in a healthcare team. And that is separate from humanitarian work. I call it humanitarian work. Other people call it community service. But humanitarian work, your project should be preferably long-term. What we're not talking about is doing a series of fundraiser because your college fraternity or sorority has a bunch of events. We're talking about having extended contact with the people that you're serving or with the organization that you're serving. If you are doing work on a faith-based way, that is perfectly okay. It is okay to list what your faith is. It is okay to be working through a church or a mosque or whatever it is. Those are good ways to do that. It's preferable that you do these with underserved populations. On the other hand, see what I said before about how it really has to fit you. But the more you have experience in serving people that are different from you, the better of a doctor or a professional that you'll be, and the better of an experience you have, and the better you can write about in your essays and talk about in your interviews. I'm going to check the chat about this real quick. Do non-clinical experiences look good? Absolutely. Yes, you need to have a good chunk of those. How do we distinguish ourselves from others to our professors and show our passions? Go to office hours, get to know them. Be present when you don't necessarily have to be present, okay? Some humanitarian work examples. So there are some national organizations, but then there's a lot of local ones, and those local ones are available on the pre-professional health side, and I can help you with some. Just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, the day before, we had the volunteer fair where there were tables and tables of folks looking for people everywhere from no-kill animal shelters, Habitat for Humanity, people who drive blind folks around in the area. There are, like, for instance, even I ride a tandem bike with 2 blind partners. There is classical stuff like boys and girls clubs, big brothers, big sisters. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. But there's so many more. Translating, teaching English as a second language, working in your community of your cultural community. All those kind of things are really great. Okay. All right, let me check the chat again real quick. Yep, I will. All right, while you are doing your experiences, not only should you keep track of your hours, but you should keep a journal and be introspective about your experiences, okay? Because not only should you be doing it just because you want to give back to the community and find something that fits, but people are going to ask you about it, especially if it's unique or it needs explanation, or what does it mean to you. These are part of the primary application and the essays, that your personal statement that you're going to talk about, and about your secondary statements. More about that soon. Okay. And here's a tip. If you are interested in becoming a doctor, working in the medical field as a doctor, there are 3 forms of doctors. One is MD. These are the ones you're thinking of. The other is called the Doctor of Osteopathy, and you may have heard of that. They're called DOs. It's a little easier to get into DO school, but it is so obvious if you tried for MD school and then didn't get into it and you try to get into DO school as a second thing. If you are interested in medicine at all, you should shadow a DO to keep all of your doors open. Okay. See what DO is all about. It might fit you very well. All right, so we talked about the curriculum, your grades, what classes you should take, what your grade, how important your grades are, that your grades aren't everything. We talked about experiences, your non-clinical, your clinical, how to manage all those things. Now let's talk about some exams, okay? All of the professional schools, many of them have a standardized entrance exam, such as the Mcat, which is used by MD, DO, and podiatry, the DAT, if you're a dentist, if you're GRE, if you want to be a vet, you want to take the GRE. If you want to go into optometry, you need to take the OAT. And if you want to be a vet or a physician's assistant, you want to take GRE. Sorry, it was late when I made that. These are big exams. You should count on studying for about 400 hours for those. They are subject matter exams, which means basically everything you learned in college might be on those. Not only are you studying the subject, but you're also studying test-taking strategies. The Mcat, for example, is 6 hours long, and that will drain your brain batteries if the first time that you take a 6-hour exam is on the day of your Mcat. So you are also practicing for taking a 6-hour exam, okay? And if you hear of anything today, this is what I want you to know. These tests are expensive of your money and your mind and your soul, okay? You invest so much in studying for them. You should never go into one of these tests thinking, well, I'll take the DAT just to see how I do on it. And maybe if I don't do so well, I'll know I was never meant to be a dentist. Don't do that, okay? First of all, if you go in with that attitude, you will do poorly because unconsciously you've left yourself an out. I want you to not think of taking these tests as testing the waters, like putting your toe in the water, but I want you to look at these tests as you are this gazelle running from a cheetah, okay? I want you to have the kind of focus and intensity for these tests like that, because they take so much effort and focus, and they take up a big chunk of your life. So you want to make sure that you treat them properly, okay? Let me check this. Your question about DO versus MD is, I would say there are different philosophies between MD and DO. And the actual places that you can practice between MDs and DOs is not very much different. Very, very small difference between the two. For example, it's mostly MDs that are like neurosurgeons, dermatologists, cardiothoracic surgeons. But I know there's up in Georgetown, there is a DO that's a cardiothoracic surgeon. It's a little bit heavy for DOs in family medicine and in orthopedics, but there's plenty of MDs there too. All the other specialties in the middle are fairly mixed with MDs and DOs, but DOs have a slightly more holistic viewpoint about seeing patients. And I tell you, I've had lots and lots of students who had good grades. They had grades good enough to get into MD programs, but they chose DO programs because that was more their style. Okay. Here's, I think one of the last things that I want to tell you about the exams, take all your prereqs before your exams, and you need to meet with an advisor to fit those in. Now, it takes 5 chemistry courses to be ready before the Mcat. And so basically, if you're going through a traditional way, your freshman year, you'll take Chem 1 and 2. Your sophomore year, you'll take Organic 1 and 2. The beginning of your junior year, you'll take Biochem. And then at the end of your junior year, you can take the Mcat. And then you can take your secondaries and your interviews. If you don't get into Chem 1 and 2 your first year, no problem. You'll take a gap year, but you do need to have all of your prereqs in before you take those exams. Can you teach yourself some of the stuff in the exams? Yeah, you can. I have not met but 2 or 3 people who are superheroes and can teach themselves biochemistry without taking a college class for it. And so I would not recommend you taking the college, the exams before you've finished the prereqs for those exams. Okay. All right. Whew. Getting close here. Let's talk about the application process. It's kind of a 4-year process, but it really does intensify your junior and your senior year. So let's talk about what that's like. When should you apply? So some of these cycles, we call them cycles, last about 1.5 years. Takes about 1.5 years to apply to med school, okay? Which means that you have an option of either applying your junior year if you want to graduate from college in 4 years and then go immediately enter into med school. Many people take a gap year in which they go through college for 4 years. They do something, they strengthen their application. For instance, they get more clinical experience, they get more volunteering experience, they do some more research or something like that. Okay. Now, which is better? It doesn't really matter. There's a very small majority for MD programs that take a gap year versus going immediately into college. Okay, so there's a few things that favor taking a gap year. You can get richer experience, you can get more clinical hours, you can just have more fun, you can travel the world, you can write poetry all year. You know, that kind of stuff that you can't do once you enter med school. Just living life. It's so nice, you know, during a gap year. Now, there are a few people who would tell you that every gap year that you take means that you start practicing medicine later. And if it's important to you, and it doesn't have to be, the later you start practicing medicine, the more of that medical salary you give up. So you can even think about it. If you are an attending, right, and you're making $200,000 a year, taking a gap year for no reason cost you like $200,000 before retirement. Yeah, that's not really important to a lot of people. And you'll have plenty of years at $200,000 a year. So that's up to you and your pre-health advisor and the sources of wisdom in your life. Okay. We do have some early admission agreements, and there is more about that in our pre-professional site. That is where you apply as a sophomore. If you do that, you can only apply to one school. You have to meet a bunch of benchmarks, and you are admitted into that one school, and you do not have the option of applying to any more schools. But it's an option, especially if you're very focused about the schools that we have an agreement with. All right, let me check the chat. Yep, many people retake their MCAT. That is true. Getting a master's is very helpful if that master's program is specifically supported of people who want to go into professional school, and it helps you improve your prereq GPA. Let's say you go through 4 years of Mason, you get a 3.2, you get a C in organic chemistry 1 and 2, and maybe a B- in biochemistry. And then you enter a master's program. If you end up with a 3.2 at the undergrad, it's likely that you're going to improve in that master's program, and then you end up with a 3.6. That is an upward trend in your GPA, and it weighs heavily. It's very helpful. The only thing is those master programs are expensive. They're expensive, and there are not very many scholarships for those things. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk, I think this is the last thing that I wanted to talk about the MCAT, like for the application deadline. I said it takes about a year and a half. Now, if you take the MCAT somewhere between January and June, right, you can get your scores back. It takes weeks to get your scores back from the MCAT. Then you can submit your first application called a primary. The primary goes into the central application system, gets distributed to all the schools that you want. Many of those schools will ask you to submit a secondary one. This is school specific, and it's typically lots and lots of essays. So you're going to spend a lot of time, months, kind of writing these secondary applications. Okay, and then the interview process, they start to really kind of they start to evaluate candidates at the end of the summer, and it is rolling admissions, which means that the people who are in first have the best chance because they start taking applicants right away. They start interviewing those applicants, and then once their class is filled, it's filled no matter what your stats are. Okay, and so getting your application in early is the best thing. I just tell people to basically June and July are the important days for filling those applications in, right? You could be interviewing anywhere from August to basically March of the next year. So you could be sitting for 6 months waiting to hear from your schools, and that happens a lot. Okay, and admissions decisions go all the way through the summer. All right, that was for MD. Let's do a little bit of other stuff such as dental. Okay, they have a soft open the second week of May. That means that you can see the application, but you can't actually submit it. In June it opens, and then again, the sooner you get it in, the better. Rolling admissions. That opens in mid-January, right? This is totally different from everything else. The May 15th is the first day that you can choose your schools, and September 15th is the last day that your application can be completed. For occupational therapy, they have, it starts in July of this year, and it closes in June of next year. So that application is open all year long, but this last week is when stepwise they start closing the applications. Okay, so it really depends on what school you want to go to, as which program that you want to go into, as to when you want to apply. Check the chat. Yes, you should seek advising from me if you want to talk about a gap year. Okay. How to maintain a good job while getting ready for med school and MCAT. It looks good that you are employed. If you are employed in the clinic, then you're killing two birds with one stone. If you're employed in some way that you are serving people, again, two birds with one stone. If you're working at Trader Joe's, getting good money, but it's not, if you can talk about it during your essays, that's okay. But if you don't have enough time to get good grades and to get, if you can't keep your GPA up and go through the application process, that is something that you'll have to prioritize something about. Again, see your advisor and sources of wisdom in your life. That's a gap year thing, right? If you have to work through college, you can do that. It's just that it'd be better to take a gap year and get your clinical and voluntary your clinical and experiences there. Okay. Where should I apply to? Here I have my 3.7 and I took my Mcat and I scored in the 85th percentile. Where should I apply to, right? Again, this is there's lots of resources out there, including your pre-health advisor, but one, only apply where you want to go, okay? Don't just send out a fishnet and end up going through the process to some place that you just really don't have any support system whatsoever, where you never wanted to be in the first place, all that kind of stuff. So don't only apply to where you would want to go. You have to do your homework on every school. Some schools have a very special mission, right? Some schools, for instance, NYU, med school is free. It is free to go to NYU for med school. No debt, no nothing. Can you imagine what it's like to get into NYU? It is absolutely, it's difficult. It's very difficult. So unless you're an Olympic athlete or something like that, that's like buying a lottery ticket. California also has such a population there that they have a different, their applications to California schools are really tough. Texas has its entirely different application process. Vet Med has interstate agreements. Since there are not that many vet schools around, you won't have like an in-state school if, for instance, I think you're in Maryland. They have an agreement with Virginia that you're counted as in-state if you go to Virginia Tech. Okay. Don't waste your time on lottery tickets. Use the MSAR, the medical school admissions requirement, to determine your competitiveness. Only apply to 16 to 20 schools, right? There's an application fee for everything. It takes time to fill out secondaries. All right. How's everybody doing?
I had a quick question. Just given, okay, so like this is like the same kinds of like this information is, I feel like it's really relevant, but the one thing that for me changes everything is like everything that happened with COVID. And then as soon as I was able to get over that like divot, I had started improving like rapidly, right? Like I did bad when COVID was happening and I was going through all the situations. And then afterwards, like there was like, you could look at my transcript and you could see clear improvement, but there's still always that part of me that's like, is there even like there are kids that did well during COVID, right? So is there like a lot of schools had sent out like, oh, we're being considerate over some things like clinical hours or things like that if you weren't able to get those during COVID. But as in your position as an advisor and like what you're seeing in real time, things that are changing with students applying every year, do you think that like that COVID and that era has like changed the way that medical schools are accepting students and the way that students are looking at the schools that they want to apply to?
This is a big and important question, and I don't know if this is good news or not, but the answer is yes and no, mostly no. The answer is no, because there are still students who still got great grades during COVID. And now they're kind of, when we write letters now, we talk about the resiliency of these students, right? So it's still just as competitive as it was before. It is not easier to get into med school because of COVID. But here's the other thing, and that is people are adapting to that more people are taking gap years to get those experiences that they need to get into med school. So the average age of matriculation is going up. It's just taking longer for non-stellar students to get in. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Let me check the chat. I see there's lots of chats here. Yeah. Okay. Everybody, I'm losing everybody, it sounds like. So let me skip ahead a couple of slides. If you're a citizen or not, it matters. If you need to apply to your state schools, right? Their mission is to prepare doctors for their states. They take applicants from their states at higher rates. It's cheaper too, lots cheaper. There are lots of other options for you, such as dual degree programs, volunteer programs, military, Caribbean schools, okay? And I will skip the part about the interviews. This is something that you can get more prepared about in other things. But if you get accepted, that's not the finish line. All the hard work that you did getting prepared for that has made you a new and stronger person and has taught you some really important skills, and therefore you will be more ready for the rigors of your school. Now, the last slide that I want to show you right now, these are called Sankey Graphs. Have you guys ever heard of these? This is off of Reddit. Yeah. So I just picked two that were well described. But for instance, this person applied to 41 primaries, got 41 secondaries, finished 40 of them, and got rejected from 35 of them. 3 people they heard back from nobody, but they got an interview invite from 2. One waitlisted them, the other accepted in. The waitlisted one accepted them later. They got into 2 schools. They're going to be a doctor. Okay. Here's another one where they had 27 primaries, 5 interview invites, went to 4 interviews, got accepted at 3 of those. So all it takes is one, right? All it takes is one. So, but it is a hard and difficult process. All right, I guess we have a little bit of time to answer questions. I definitely prefer answering questions that are general as opposed to your personal circumstances. So if you have any general questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can put something in the chat.
Dr. Heron, if it's okay, before we jump into questions, one of our panelists, Cynthia, she has to leave at 6:15. So she'll just very quickly introduce herself, address some of the things that she can address, and then we can go on with questions if that's okay.
Sure. I just want to wave at Parisha over there. I see that she's here. I'm very anxious to see her. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi guys, my name is Cynthia. I am 14 weeks away from graduating with my doctorate in physical therapy, so we're getting close. And you guys asked some really great questions in the chat. And so I just am probably going to put a couple little answers in there, just more about professional things and what schools are looking for. I have several friends who are in medical school and occupational therapy, and I have friends in vet school and across the board. So I've kind of been able to sit down with them, and we all went through the process together. So I can kind of speak from multiple angles.
Cynthia, would you mind just quickly telling them about your journey to PT school?
Yeah. So just real quick, guys, sorry to totally interrupt. So back in 2012, I had a major injury and realized while I was spending all this time at physical therapy that I wanted to go to physical therapy school. But along the way, there were a lot of challenges, and I wanted to make sure this was the right fit for me. So I started shadowing physical therapists in 2016. By the time that I applied, I actually had gotten over 600 hours of observation in multiple settings. I looked at pediatrics, I looked at orthopedics, I even went into the inpatient hospital and inpatient rehab facility settings, and those are hard to get. It took me 3 years to get into a hospital and asking many, many people. So if you want to do something like that, definitely get started. I was really lucky because in high school, I managed to connect with the American Physical Therapy Association, one of their main directors. She and I happened to meet by complete circumstance, and she was the one who was really able to mentor me through the process, to provide me ideas of where to look. I got to talk to some of the top physical therapy school, some of even their directors, their presidents. I did a couple of that. I looked at some of the big ones here. Pittsburgh is one of the top PT schools in America. And I actually got to sit down one-on-one with the director, ask questions and talk to them about just all sorts of things. So the biggest thing that I learned from that opportunity that I want you guys to know is you need to be asking questions with whatever program you're going into, thinking about what's important to you. Do you want to be close to family? Do you want to be, in a different state? Really think about the weather. That has a big impact. The Pittsburgh director looked at me and said, Cynthia, don't come here for undergrad if you want to come here for graduate school, because everybody hates the weather and they leave by the time they get out of their 4 years. Don't come here for undergrad. Well, I didn't, obviously. So it's important to think about those sorts of things. And that was probably one of the biggest things of advice that was really important for me. The process for me, so I took a gap year partway through college, and then in 2019 is when I started my applications. I took my GRE in May. I started applying. So the PT school has a central application, kind of like what you have for colleges. And that opens in June. I started in June, finished end of July, beginning of August. It's really important to have strong recommendation letters for that. You take your GRE, which I said, which is a little bit, I want to say more in tune with like the SAT and the ACT. It's not quite the Mcat. You don't have biochemistry on there, which is nice. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. And the other thing that I would say is really be prepared to dedicate your entire summer to that. I was working probably 30 hours a week, and the whole rest of it was just applications, essays, writing all sorts of things. Make sure that you save money. I think I applied to 6 schools and it was over $2,000 just to apply. That doesn't include the lost time that I had from not working full time. So just applying is a massive financial just requirement. And that was actually the reason I didn't apply to more schools. But one of the things that can reduce that is, like I said, just focusing on what's important to you. So I learned through my mentor that some schools specify better in one thing over the other. So for example, I really want to do neuroacute care, which is a very specific thing. The majority of your PT schools are going to be focused on orthopedics or more generalized physical therapy, particularly outpatient. So it's important to kind of ask them who professors are and kind of Google and learn who are your top professors. I actually had the opportunity to learn from one of the top neuro PTs in the US at my program. The other thing to be aware is I'm part of a 2-year hybrid accelerated program, and it's becoming a new in thing. Most schools are 3 years. It's important to think about, can you do that? Can you handle learning the same amount of information that most people learn in 3 and 2? Can you learn online? Can you deal with traveling? I traveled from Virginia to Tennessee and lived there 3 weeks every 4 months. And it's tough on family, it's tough on living situations, it's a big financial thing. So it's important to think about what type of things you're looking for. So I'm seeing the questions kind of coming in right now. What are good ways to get shadowing? Where should you get started? Honestly, my biggest thing is I just Googled physical therapy and I found outpatient clinics and I called them and I just started asking. That's how I got my pediatric. I got my my orthopedics through that. That's how I got my acute care. You start asking anybody and everybody, do you have a relative who works for the hospital? Do you know someone who works in a hospital? Even with no experience, just asking, hey, can I observe? The majority of PTs love taking new people. And I feel like that's a lot for most medical professionals. So if you want to just bop in for just, hey, can I come in on a Saturday? A lot of the times they're really willing to work with you. I think jobs is something where you can show that you can learn, something that you can show where you can teach and effectively communicate with people. That's a really big thing for a lot of the schools, is how much can you communicate with someone, encourage them, and help them. So I was a math tutor for 10 years. I also was a personal trainer at the George Mason Recreation Center. I taught classes. I also was a personal driver for an older person. There are just some jobs that sound random, but they really do help you. So if you want to shadow for other professionals, so I was about to get to that. I also shadowed an OT. I worked for a psychiatric group for a year. And I also spent time shadowing MDs, DOs, and I'm pretty sure I even looked into speech therapy. If you just reach out to the field and say, hey, I'm interested in going into healthcare, I want to see if this is for me. A lot of the times they'll just say, okay, you want to come in for an afternoon, you can work it around your classes. So even if you want to go to DO school, I would really suggest reaching out to other professionals, because you may think one thing's for you, but then realize, I thought I wanted to do orthopedics. And then as soon as I found neuro, that was my thing. So yeah, that's what I've got.
Thank you, Cynthia.
And really quickly, for anybody who has questions, I'm going to drop my email in the chat. I'm also going to drop a really important website in the chat that just tells you more about, allows you to very easily compare requirements of schools and what those schools are. And it gives you observation hours, it tells you requirements, it tells you all sorts of things. And that was kind of my golden, my Bible, basically, when I was getting ready to apply, is I knew exactly what I needed, and there were no surprises.
Dr. Heron, if you would like to answer some questions, you can. If you need to leave, we can also transition to the remaining panelists as well. And Cynthia, if you need to leave, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, I'm afraid that I do need to go, but people can email me at gheron@gmu.edu. And I am also very curious for people who have gone through this process recently, like Parisha, like Cynthia, whether or not the advice that I had given, whether you would temper that in any way or not. But I do have to go, and I'll be looking at the recording to see your responses. So thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Heron, for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And just in case, I'm going to send a follow-up email with some of the links that Dr. Heron was talking about earlier, and email information for some of our panelists. So I'll be sending that shortly after our meeting here today. But Ms. Rahman, did you want to pick up from here?
Yeah, so the other three panelists that we have today are Rimshar Rana, who is currently at Georgetown Medical School, Parisha Khan, who is currently at NYU School of Dentistry, and then Elisha Muhsi, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, who is getting ready to finish up at GW Medical. So Cynthia, if you want to stay, you're more than welcome to. Can we go ahead and start with Barisha? Actually, we'll have Ribsha go first, and then Barisha, and then Elisha, if that's okay. And each of you, if you could tell us your journey to your specific destination and how you got there, and then be open to answering questions if that is okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ramsha. I'm a third-year medical student at Georgetown. I'm currently doing my psychiatry rotation here at Baltimore. They put us in different places to do rotations. I think in the chat, someone said they're interested in psychiatry. So I was in your shoes a couple years ago. I graduated in 2020, so not too long ago. I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give during undergrad is like, make sure like as you're going through the different, things you're doing as a pre-med, you figure out what's your why and your passion for going into medicine, because that'll make it easier for you when you come to the application process and have to write about all of that. One recommendation I would definitely give is if you can apply to internships, because then it helps you get good letters of rec and great experience. And there's many internships out there. I did one at Georgetown after my sophomore year, and I was able to get letters of rec from the people I worked with at Georgetown, and that helped in me getting here.
Then Rimsha, really quickly, did you take any gap years or did you go straight to Georgetown? And if you didn't take a gap year, how did you go straight to Georgetown?
Oh yeah, so I didn't take a gap year. I went straight through, and the way I did it was every summer I was doing something. So like the summer after freshman year, I was taking a couple science classes to ease up my schedule later on. And I had everything planned ahead of time. I knew by sophomore year I want to get some research done. And then that's when I really started planning. And I took the Mcat my third year of college, my junior year, and then had everything ready to go to apply the summer of. So I guess like it was a lot of planning. And so that's how I did it. And I tried to get as much as I could get done during the summers. Oh, and where can you get internships and shadowing experiences? You can actually, like, the AAMC has a website, and I also have a PowerPoint that I can link to with I have some lists, but I can share that with you guys. I'll put it in the chat.
Barisha, would you want to get started on your story?
Sure. Hi, Ms. Rahman. I hope everything is going well. Hey guys, I'm Parisha. I'm a second-year dental student at NYU, and I did my undergrad at George Mason. I double majored in biology and neuroscience. So my story is a little bit different because I actually graduated from Mason in 3 years because I brought a lot of high school credits in. So because I graduated in 3 years, I used that 4th year as my gap year. And in that year, I worked as a dental assistant, I volunteered in my community, and I also applied. So I studied for the DAT. And as Dr. Heron mentioned, the application process is about 6 months to a year. So I was busy with that. But I definitely do want to say one thing. I'm like, to this day, I'm very grateful for my education at George Mason because I felt that it really helped me stand out as an applicant. Becoming involved. I know with COVID it was hard, but at Mason there's a lot of things to do. So Mr. Rahman was my advisor. Dr. Heron, she wrote my letter of rec. I did research. I was a peer mentor for autistic students. I was an ambassador. I was president of dental clubs. There's just so much to do at Mason that, and you know, in my interviews, we never talked about my grades. We talked about everything else. So they really like to see you doing different things. Schools care about that a lot. And it really, really helps you stand out. So for that, I'm very, very appreciative. And if you guys ever have questions, I'll put my email, follow me on Instagram. I don't mind helping out.
And last but not least, Elisha.
Hey guys, hey Tamina, hey Gabby. Can everyone hear me? Cool. So I'm a medical student at GW. I'm currently like a 3.5 year. So I finished my 3rd year and I'm about to start my MPH year. And then next year I'll begin my 4th year. So basically my journey went to Mason. I graduated in 2018. I took a gap year. So I took the Mcat. Actually, I started studying before, but I wasn't really confident junior year. And some of my friends took a junior year and they didn't do well. And so that kind of scared me. And so I was like, okay, I'll push it. So I graduated and then I just dedicated that summer to studying for the Mcat. And I actually took it pretty late, which I don't recommend, but I think I took it in July. And I had already submit my application in May. So one thing is, if you do push your MCAT, do not delay your application because it takes a whole month for your application to get processed. So you have time after you submit your application, but you don't want to like delay the application. So I would recommend that like have your application submitted. Then I took my MCAT. I think my whole application was like completed by the end of August. Again, you want it as soon as possible, as was said earlier. But basically most schools get back to like reviewing applications around August because they're on break as well. And then, yeah, that was pretty much it. I think I applied to like 9 schools. I was like, at this point, if I get in, I get in, which is I don't recommend doing. And then I got a few interviews and then I ended up getting into a few schools and I chose GW because it was closer to home. And so that was my journey. If anyone has any like questions, I can answer them as well.
Would each of you mind sharing how many schools you've applied to?
I applied to 23 and I got into one and got waitlisted at one. So it all depends. You never know.
Good for you, Rimsha. That's amazing. So I applied to 12, and I interviewed at 7.
There were some questions in the chat about basically time management, like how you can manage having a competitive GPA with everything else that you're supposed to do, including your patient care experience, clinical hours, extracurricular activities, etc. So do any of you, actually all of you, any insights about how you personally handled that and the types of resources, tools, or support structures or systems at Mason that helped?
I can't emphasize this enough, but waking up early, like I remember like in undergrad, I would wake up at like 5 o'clock in the mornings. And that helped out once you get into med school and you have clinicals and you have to wake up at like ungodly hours. But what the benefit was is that like you could get more stuff done in the day. And then I guess what resources helped me, like advising, like Ms. Ramon definitely helped out. And then also some other professors that I worked very closely with. And I guess like just building in like schedules for yourself.
I will definitely say the Honors College was a huge plus at George Mason. It allowed me to start my research freshman year because of Honors 110. And the honors advisors are amazing. The professors are amazing. They really care about you. So that for research and opportunities, that was great. And then another thing, GMU always has club fairs, career fairs. I would go to all of them. That's how I got involved in all of the clubs. So that was very helpful as well. And just building rapport, like I would go to office hours for TAs. I was in LA and they're students, right? They're going through the same journey, a bit older than you. And I would always ask them for advice. So you always put your academics first and then build the extracurriculars. So every year I would just keep building my extracurriculars on that. And schools, at least dental schools, they love to see consistency, that you did something, not 10 different things your senior year of undergrad, but you did 2 things consistently for 4 years.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I would start as soon as possible, right? So when you apply for medical school, on your application, you'll have a section for each activity you did. You'll be able to list when you started that activity and how many hours you've spent on that activity. So again, I started early, so for me, it wasn't an issue, but schools, ideally schools don't want to see that you started everything junior year right before you apply, right? Because it kind of looks like disingenuous. So start early. And the good thing about starting early is the commitment can be bare minimum. And by the time you apply, you'll have more than enough hours. I started shadowing clinically freshman year, and I was doing like 4 hours a week. And by the time I applied, I had like over 1,000. I remember during the first year of undergrad, I like gave up my whole winter break and I did 10 hours a day for a week. So I got like almost 100 hours in 1 week. So just be like smart so you have enough hours. And then again, I didn't do anything at Mason. Like, not that
I'm sorry, Michael, I'm doing the pre-health panel.
Yeah, so again, like find stuff that's you're interested in. I wasn't really interested in clubs or anything like that. The only thing I did at Mason was research, and I started that early as well. I started that freshman year, and I would recommend, I don't know if they still have the Oscar program, but I did my research through the Oscar program, so I got paid to do research as well. And the thing is, with medical school applications, it's not what you've done, but it's how you present it. Okay, so you want to really like play up everything, and they know you're not going to find like the cure to cancer by the time you apply in medical school, right? What they want to see is that through your research, did you learn the key skills that they want you to have, right? Are you a critical thinker? Are you able to ask tough questions? Are you able to go through research and find what's important? You could do this through any experience, right? You just have to like be able to show that you've learned this stuff. With any experience you've done, you have to talk about how you learned, like how it affected you and what you learned from it. That's all it is. Once you get into medical school, you're going to realize there are people who've done like research at Yale and Harvard and went there and stuff. But it doesn't matter because they just care about what you learned. So find things that are interested like to you and that you can talk about. Also, I didn't have a lot of people ask me about like publications. I actually got publications after graduating during my gap year. But the research experience was enough to list that I had this many hours. I participated in these research experiences, and this is what I learned from it. In terms of shadowing, again, there are people who work at the clinic. I would be very careful to do that because you're not going to get, unless you get a clinical position, most of the time the jobs are like administrative. So you actually get less clinical experience, right? Because they need you at the front desk. Also, when you volunteer, there's no expectations. They can expect you to do anything. So everything you do, you're going above and beyond. And when you volunteer, you're not there to be an administrative support. So you can actually ask, can I shadow? So that's just one thing I would recommend. And then I combined my volunteering and my clinical experience together. I had some volunteering experience in the community as well, but by combining it, I was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So I would just think about like maximizing your time, right? You have to have certain activities. So you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of those activities.
I actually couldn't agree more. Like everything you just said was so accurate. And I saw a question in the chat, like, what if you're a transfer student? A lot of my friends in med and dental school were transfer students to Mason as well. And that's totally okay because yeah, we're giving you guys all this advice, but at the end of the day, you have to remember everyone has their own story and it totally matters, just as he said, how you portray it. So if you're a transfer, you still have a ton of time, whether you want to get involved in Mason or in the community, however you want to do it. And one big thing I want to mention, at least for dental school, I would definitely say shadow or work as a dental assistant. It gives you such a leg up. They love talking to you about during the interviews. And now as a second year, like in labs, it's so helpful. Everything that I'm doing, all the instruments I'm using, I already saw it when I was working. And I do have a lot of friends who were interested in dentistry, but after working in a clinic, they were like, no, this isn't for me. So that's also another way you can see, because oftentimes people are like, oh, medical school or dental school, I don't know what I want to do. So that's what I would advise.
And yeah, adding on to that, like, don't worry about being a transfer student. I actually have a friend who's a year below me at Georgetown who was a transfer student from Nova as well. She came to Mason. She got in directly as well. She didn't have to take a gap year. But adding on to what Parisha and Elisha both said, make sure you keep record of phone numbers, emails, and other contact information of all the people you worked with, like if you shadowed with them or volunteered, because they all ask you that in the application. They ask for the contact information, and sometimes, not always, but they can like verify if they need to. So again, don't lie about your hours, because like you never know if they could call to verify. I guess another thing is like you don't have to make all your research and volunteer experience medically related. Like I had research in immigration of all things, and that's what was talked about during my interview. And you can also have other activities like where you show you care for a specific population group, and that helps you stand out. And I guess like what I'm going to say is like it's a really strange process, and you never know what one school is going to love about you versus another. But like just, I guess like just be yourself and then find what makes you like, light up as you go through undergrad, and that'll help you out.
Yeah, just to piggyback, exactly, I agree with both of them. The most important thing when you're talking about balancing between extracurriculars and GPA and Mcat, it's very important to remember, don't overcommit, right? So again, you can have a few experiences that are worthwhile and speak to your story, right? That's the most important thing, but you cannot compromise with grades and Mcat because they won't even look at your application, right? They filter applications with grades and Mcat. So that cannot, you have to, I know this sounds crazy when I tell you have to aim for a 4.0 every semester. Not that you will get it, but that should be your aim. And I didn't have a 4.0, but as long as you aim for the best, even if you like get a B here and there, you'll be fine.
I usually have questions from incoming students and some second-year students about how they can get their foot in the door in terms of research. So any advice about that and what they should do? I know a couple of you mentioned Oscar, but any other maybe additional resources or advice about getting your foot in the door and connecting with professors, etc.
So Oscars, in addition to that, is a great way. You can make your own project. That's what I did, or you can work on a project. Another thing you can do is like ask your professors, especially your science professors. They're usually all working on some sort of research project. You could ask if you could join their labs. I sent the link for pre-med research internships. That's a great way because then you get a connection to the school that later on you apply to and research experience. But again, with that, you have to apply to a lot because you might get into some, you might not. And the more you apply to, the more chance you have.
For sure. And so what I started my freshman year, I mentioned the Honors 110. We did a research project the entire semester that counted. And then after that, for one of my neuro classes, I was in a neuro lab and my professor was a PhD student. So just as Rimsha said, I went up to him, hey, what research are you working on? Can I be involved? And he let me come onto his project and we published a paper. So, and I didn't even know we were going to do that. And then other ones, Dr. Heron was my neuroscience professor. She mentioned she does research. I went to her after class, hey, and I did Oscar through her actually. And I continued that for my last 2 years of college. So simply like sometimes you just have to go up, ask, email, because there's a lot. And I know the bio department at Mason offers a class in the fall. I think you have to take it in the fall and the spring. It's like a year-long research project and you write a paper after.
Yeah, the bio semester is great. So if anybody doesn't have like a lot of research, I would highly recommend. I know people who got into medical school and they did the bio semester, like the spring of junior year or fall of senior year even, and it gave them more than enough hours because that's all you're taking research. It gave them like experiences to add in their application and to talk about during interviews. Also, once you apply, it's not over. You can continuously update medical schools and you can update the portals. And that's something I did during my gap year throughout. In fact, it also shows them that you're really interested in the program if you're updating them. So even if you feel like you don't have time to do everything right now, that's okay. Just continue like to focus on school right now and your Mcat, and then you can like do that stuff during your gap year too.
Oh, just adding on to what Elisha said, one thing that actually helps in med schools, like after you get your interview, if you really want to go to that school, I did this for Georgetown. I sent them a letter of intent right after I interviewed saying like, hey, this is my number one choice. I would love to be here, all of that, and updated them on what I was doing. And I submitted it to the portal, and that helped. I got my acceptance faster than what the timeline was and that I was expecting. So definitely keep those in mind.
One thing to add, I agree with Elisha. I really used my gap year as well. I continued working, volunteering, and same as Rimsha said, I also would send those emails. And in those emails to the schools after my interview, I'd update them. Oh, I'm doing this, I'm keeping up with this. And they really like to see that. And it shows that you really care and you want to get in.
I'm going to have to take off in 5 minutes, but I just wanted to, I don't want to discourage anyone, but I really think it's so important. Part of the reasons why medical schools want you to volunteer or shadow is because they want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. And again, I think everybody should go into these fields because we need more diversity. It's so important. The studies show that diverse doctors contribute to better outcomes for diverse patients. It's like so crucial. So I don't want to discourage anyone. And when I was applying, almost every doctor I worked with like discouraged me, told me not to apply to medical school. And that's very common, you'll hear that. But really think about it, right? Shadow, and there were questions I didn't ask doctors before when I was shadowing that I wish I did. It's not rude to ask a doctor how many hours they're spending in the clinic, how many hours they're spending outside the clinic, charting, doing paperwork. Get a good idea of this. Also, like, do your research of what are you interested in, because it takes so long. You're going to give up 10 years of your life to be a doctor, right? You're going to pretty much sacrifice your whole 20s. So you have to really think about what your goals are in life. Do I think it's worth it? I hope so right now, but it's really important. There are kids who I know, obviously they don't like talk about it openly, but who are like depressed, okay, in medical school. It's because they go in thinking like, oh yeah, I always wanted to be a doctor, or their family just like pushed them into this direction. And that's all they knew. They never got the opportunity to explore other fields or other careers, even in healthcare. So this would be a great opportunity during your undergrad to like explore, maybe not like medical school, but there's PA school, there's dental school, there's so many opportunities, even nursing school. And look at what their commitment is for time. Because looking back, a lot of people in my school wish they went to PA school because they end up practicing and it's only like a few years, right? You don't have to do like residency. It's changing, but think about that stuff, right? Like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Do you see yourself in school and in debt? And if you do, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But these are really important questions that people don't think about. I did not think of any of that, right? I didn't realize that I'm going to do another 4 years and then I'm going to have to go into fellowship as well, right? So that's like 7 years after medical school more before I earn a salary. And all my friends who went into IT, they're all married now. So they all have like great salaries. Yeah, and so you're going to see, again, I don't want to discourage anybody, but you're going to see your friends moving on in life. And by the time you're in medical school, they're going to be like getting married and buying houses. So this is like important. You have to think about this stuff. Yeah.
Adding on to that, don't get discouraged by all your friends getting married and buying houses and having kids. You'll get it at your time. But like, I just wanted to add on, I cannot emphasize this enough because like, example, if you want to be a surgeon, that means you're going to be waking up at 3:30 in the morning. I did my surgery rotation a couple months ago and the hours were 3:30 to 7 p.m., 3:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. most days. But other specialties like psychiatry right now, it's pretty chill. It's like 9 to 4. So it's like, there's different specialties in medicine, but yeah, make sure you know what you're getting into. And the other thing is like, I heard this from a doctor. It was like, if you're going into medicine, you better be sure that there's nothing else you see yourself as. And the other thing is you have to love people because you're not always, yes, medicine is a very respected field. People do admire you, but I'm going to be honest with you, you're not going to get admiration all the time, especially when you're working in the clinic. You need to love people at even their worst because that's when you see them. You see them in their most fragile states. And you need to have, I guess, like, you need to be able to develop the emotional intelligence to take it from the patients. Like I had a patient this morning, like I was just saying, good morning, was like, get out of here. Like, I don't want to talk to you. So like, you're going to see patients like that, but then you're going to see other patients who are like, oh, so lovely seeing you. So like, make sure you can handle different interactions from different people and know how to keep yourself calm in every situation, because that is a very important part of med school. I feel like the biggest character development I had in med school, especially on rotations, was how to stay calm in the situations and not freak out, and how to, I guess, professionally stand up for yourself while you're in the workplace.
I'm so glad that they brought this up by Elisha, and I'm so happy that he brought this up because it's a topic that not a lot of us talk about. I remember at Mason, the goal was, I need to get into med school, I need to get into dental school. I'm gonna do everything and anything. It doesn't matter what, I don't care about my mental health. I just need to get in. And once I get in, I'm fine. Coming into dental school, it's not like that at all. Once you get in, you have to continue to survive. So before I started dental school, I had a friend at VCU's program, and I was like, oh, you're so lucky you're in the program. Like, how are you? She's like, Prisha, like, she gave me a very blunt answer that really woke me up. She's like, unless you are 100% sure, do not come into this profession, because as they both mentioned, it's not rainbows and flowers every day. There are long hours, there are tears that are shed, there's a lot of stress and anxiety. So many of my classmates see this school's therapist, you know, so really, and I was mentoring a student from GMU last week. She's like, oh, I just want to become a doctor for the name. And I was like, then I'm sorry, I hate to tell you this, but you should not be doing it. I know, like, helping people, it's amazing. You do get doctor in front of your name, but this is just so much more than that. You're putting in so much of your time and effort. So please, like, as both Rimsha and Elisha said, shadow, look at different specialties, look at different options. You don't just have to get into dental school and med school. There's so much more that you can do. And yeah, as always, reach out to us for advice, reach out to your advisors at Mason, professors for advice. And yeah, the best advice that I got was from students who went through this process, because they gave it to me very real, black and white. And sometimes you do need to hear that, even if you don't always want to.
I feel like, Parisha, could you actually add on to this? I feel like this is an important thing that is romanticized on TikTok and Instagram, but here are the real hours of a med student. So I'm in my clinical years right now. So preclinical is like all classroom work. Preclinical, I was still waking up at 5 o'clock. I would study a little bit before lectures, then I'd go to lectures. And it was usually at least 9 to 12. We'd have lunch, and then after that, we'd have afternoon sessions. I would be done by 5 o'clock, and after that, I'd have to study and do this every single day. And weekends were not weekends. You continue that schedule at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you keep going. When you're in rotations, it's different. Surgery, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had to get at the hospital by 4:30 to see patients and read up on all the surgery material. I'd get home at 7, and then I'd have to study for an exam that I'd have at the end. And I went to sleep at around 10 on a good day, midnight most days. It was very difficult. And then after that, I had neurology, which was a little bit better, but still, I got more sleep during that time. But you will be working long hours for all of med school. And right now I'm in psychiatry, and the hours are better, but I'm still waking up at 5 in the morning because I have to prepare for the patients and prepare for exams on our own, because in clinical times, we don't have lectures anymore. We have to study on our own for an exam that doesn't always show everything we saw during the rotation. We have to do a lot of self-studying. So that's a big part of med school. And another thing is like, this is not emphasized enough, but learn how to take care of yourself in stressful moments while you're an undergrad. Because if you're freaking out and not having good coping mechanisms develop now, it's only going to get harder. And I feel like I got better at coping after I got into med school, but like, you need to learn these things now, because if you don't, I have seen it in my classmates, you will hit a breaking point, and it's very bad. Your mental health is just as important as your physical. And then this is a little unrelated, but please, while you're an undergrad, learn how to cook. Do not be the med student going to McDonald's every day. Like, we cannot be lecturing our patients to eat healthy and then literally just have all these hash browns from the morning. It's better for you. You do better when you're eating better. You can actually tell your patients the same thing. And yeah, and you won't have that 20-30 pound weight gain the first few years of med school. So just learn that now.
No, it's such accurate advice. You're right. I like to share my journey on TikTok, Instagram, but that's just a fraction of my life, right? That's not all of it. That's not every day. And one thing that I didn't mention, that I do regret my time at Mason, I gave it my all to get into dental school and I got in. But one thing that I did not work on was exactly what Rimsha said, how to truly cope in these situations of severe stress, anxiety, and also how to find something like a hobby that's totally non-dental, non-med related. Because I remember in one of my interviews, the officer of admissions asked me, "What's your hobby?" And I was like, "Oh, I like to help people. I like it." And he's like, "No, what's your hobby?" And I, for the longest time, because I spent all my life studying, I didn't really know how to answer that. And so it wasn't until midway in my first year, I joined soul cycling. I absolutely love it. Like those workout classes, I get to take out my anger, my anxiety, walking there, because in New York City, we walk everywhere. Even walking there, I look forward to it. It's such like a nice part of my day. So you really should find a hobby or something that makes you happy, because you will need those moments where you need to break away from school and the stress of that. So yeah, definitely. And as for the cooking, yeah, I ate out way too much here. I spent so much money, but now I'm like learning. So it's all about balance and learning. That's just how the process will work for everyone, but definitely like take care of your mental health.
Last thing I want to say, I know it's getting late, but please, this is very hard coming from, in this field, but do not compare yourself to others and do not compare everything you see on social media. Take it with a grain of salt. And you need to view these things, like if someone's already in med school, you're still applying, or you're behind, or you feel like you're not doing as much. You need to look at these things, other people's blessings, as mirrors of what God is capable of doing. You can't look at it as like, oh, my light's been dimmed because someone else has more than me. You can't do it like that. You gotta make sure you honor your friends' accomplishments, but also keep knowing that everyone has their own journey and everyone's journey is different, and you'll eventually get to your destination.
Yeah, and I just see one question: where do you find time to do the hobbies? So to be very realistic, you won't always find the time. A lot of times at Mason, I was maxing out 18 credits, doing research, working. You don't. But one thing that taught me in dental school, now that I take 30 credits a semester, which I never thought I was capable of doing, is you will have, based on your schedule, it's all about balance. Like Rimsha was like, she wakes up 5 a.m. every day. I am not a morning person. I would hate waking up, but I had to learn. So I wake up 6, 7 a.m. every day so I could fit in that workout class. So I fit something else in. So you do need to live a balanced routine lifestyle, and hopefully you can then fit in the time for your hobby. And I think Iman has her hand raised.
Yes, I do. This is probably a question that I should have asked a while ago when the co-host was still here. But I know, like, mostly because of like stuff which happened a few years ago, like I know like I'm unable in order to like take the full even like the full recommended course load, let alone having to take the 18 credits that I assume most people who have to go into pre-health do. Although I'm interested in pharmacy, I noticed that I don't think it's that much softer, and mostly because of mental disabilities preventing me from taking the full load. Will I be like disqualified from medical school, or will I have to like make it like a written accommodation that I have because of a mental disability? And keep in mind, I'm primarily interested in a pharmacy school and not medical school all that much.
I will definitely say that does not disqualify you from being accepted into pharmacy school or even being considered. I chose to take the 18 because I was graduating early, but a lot of my friends in med, dental, pharmacy, PA, nursing school, they took 14, 15, even 12. So of course, like your school will know about your mental disability as you choose to share it, but that will definitely not stop you. So please, like, don't let that be a reason. Like, that will never, ever, ever stop you. They will understand that.
Thank you so much for answering my question. And I think I have to qualify. However, I think based on how I planned it, I'm going to end up having like a late graduation in like spring of 2028 when I started in spring 2022, because I have to like balance with taking 7 to 9 credits depending on the semester.
Yeah, so just a friendly reminder, Iman, and all of you who are here today, if you look on the pre-health website, I think the average matriculating age of applicants who enter professional school is like 24 or 25, which means that most applicants are taking 1 or 2, sometimes more gap years before they apply. So I am not a professional. I am not the pre-health advisor, but I do have some experience advising pre-health students in my previous role. So I will just say that it is important for you to apply when you are the most competitive. And if you being competitive takes a little bit longer than your anticipated timeline, in my opinion, that's fine. It shouldn't, that should not be a barrier. What you shouldn't do is apply when you are not competitive and then have to go through the entire process again. And, so that's something to keep in mind as you all move through your tenure here at Mason. I would say that Rimsha is probably an exception where she went straight to med school after Mason. Most of our students, that's not the case for them, and that's fine. It's just because of the competitive nature of professional schools, you have to think critically and honestly about what you are capable of doing and managing and handling. And I think it goes directly back to the conversation that Parisha and Rimsha were having earlier about, taking care of yourself and prioritizing your health and well-being.
Yeah, I'm so happy this was brought up, because in my dental program, actually, majority of my classmates are 25 plus, and the eldest student in my class is 45 years old. So please, age, truly, it's not the end all be all. I was rushing to get in, and I was like, oh, I even took a gap year, and then I come to find out majority of classmates are older than me. So again, that just Mrs. Rahman said it best. When you feel you're actually ready and competitive, apply, but please don't rush the process.
Also, like, I have classmates, one of my best friends in my med school, she's Muslim American, she's from Syria. She's almost 40. She has 2 kids, a Muslim husband, and she's in med school with me. So, you never know. Like, people make it work.
Zara, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, so can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. But continuing in Iman's story and the conversation, I also had like a kind of relatable story. Like, I moved to States when I was 16 and like was 21 and when I graduated high school. So like right now, like when I'm 25, I'm just getting to my bachelor degree journey and medical school, and becoming a neurologist. And all I think thought about my childhood and all my high school years and still now. So like I don't know if that's a sign or something, but like when I think it was Parisha, like I'm sure, I don't remember which one of you mentioned that find something else that if you have other interests beside medical schools or, health professions. I really try my best, but like that's the only I always think about, and like I'm highly focused on maybe like a bit too much, and that alone gives me a lot of stress because I'm always hyper focused and like alerted. So like feeling a burnout kind of comes a lot. And if you guys have any like advice or anything for me to like kind of find my way in this kind of unbalanced journey, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so hey Zara, I definitely don't think your age is an issue. As you said, you came to the States at 16. That's your story. And again, if you when you say that story in a way to a med school or whatever health profession school, they're gonna be amazed by that story, that wow, she didn't give up. And as for, you said you can't see anything other than that, then try it, go for it. I knew I have classmates who wanted to do dentistry the year before they graduated college, but I knew since I was 16 years old, I saw nothing else, no plan B. So I gave it my 100% and I said, I want this. So of course, like you don't know unless you try. So I would never discourage you not to try it.
Thank you so much. I may have to email you later too for mentoring, if that's okay.
So we are coming right up on time. So if anyone has any last minute questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or put the question in the chat. But before we leave, I do not want to leave this space without Rimsha, you talking about the Arches program. I think that was the internship that you were referring to. And Brescia, if you have a similar experience, please feel free to share. But if you could just tell us about the Arches program and what that is and how you got accepted and those types of things, that would be great. This will be recorded, yes. And if you would like the recording, you can reach out to either me or Ms. Guzman to request it.
Right. Yes. So
Yes. Sorry, Rimsha, for totally interrupting you. I'll be sending an email with information about how to obtain that recording and also follow up with some links and information to our panelists. So be on the lookout for that.
So the Arches program stands for Academy of Research Clinical Health Equity Scholarship, and it's for diverse individuals. And the director of the program is actually coming to me soon, I think tomorrow over Zoom. Her name is Isela Melendez Carpio. I would definitely recommend you go to her info session. So I actually found out about the program through Jen. I used to work in the Office of Diversity as a small little job presenting, and she's the one who told me about the program, and she told me to apply, and she was like, I'm confident you'll get in. And I remember applying because I was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to try. It seemed really out of reach because it was only back then for like 8 students out of the whole country. But I applied, and it was almost like a practice for applying to med school. Like it had multiple personal statements and essays, like why you want to go into medicine and your journey. And there were 2 interview rounds, but I am so grateful for this program. It really did change my life, and it made getting into med school much easier, and it made it seem like this isn't as far of a goal as I thought it was. So during the Arches program, I got to shadow for the first time. It's really hard to find connections to shadow doctors with, especially if you come from like a first generation family where you don't have as many connections. My family also didn't go to the doctors as often. We didn't even have a primary care that I could ask. So that was fun. And I got a taste of like what med school is like. I remember I shadowed one day as early as 6 o'clock, and that's very close to what we do in med school now. We were partnered with a research lab, and we presented our research project at the end of 6 weeks for the internship. And when I did it, it was in person, so they provided housing as well. You lived on campus. It was really nice housing too. And yeah, and we also saw a lot of local programs like La Clínica de Pueblos and Whitman Walker, which served specific groups who were marginalized within the communities. And I got to make so many good connections through that program, and I stayed in touch. And luckily, I was able to get letters of recommendation from them in med school and great advice. And it just it really solidified my belief that, you know what, I can become a doctor. And now I blink and I'm like, I can't believe I'm in my 3rd year of med school. So I would definitely apply to the Arches program. And I just want you all to know, I got this internship after 2 years of applying to different internships. I applied to I want to say I applied to over 50 internships, both my 1st and 2nd year combined. I didn't get any my 1st year. My 2nd year, I got this and I got another one, and then I chose the Georgetown one. So you're gonna applying takes a lot of time and work, but it is worth it. And again, the more you apply, the more chance you have to be able to choose which one you want to go to at the end.
That's awesome. And yeah, I totally agree. Applying does take time. So for me, the only internship, I guess you can say, I did a lot of outreach. So George Mason has a VAW, Volunteers Around the World. They have a medical club for that and a dental, and both travel. So I went to the Dominican Republic for 2 weeks and we did free dental care on patients. And I know the medical team also goes and they do checkups as well. But I know there is a VCU indent program, and then VCU also offers SAEP, where once you're an undergrad, you go for the summer, like a few weeks, and you can take a few classes. You can kind of get an intro to what med school or dental school is like. So those are opportunities.
I also want to say one more thing before I forget, but please don't underestimate these internships. It's so important because I have classmates of mine whose grandparents went to Georgetown Med School and their parents and now them. So it's 3 generations, they have that connection to it. Internships are a way for especially students like us, 1st gen, to create that connection before we get into med school. And, when I submitted my letter of intent to Georgetown, I was like, I was here for my internship. I loved it here. I want to come back. So this is super, super important. And internships are a great way to show a different side of you that people in the classroom alone cannot see, and that school will remember you, obviously, do a good job while you're there. So yes, super important, everyone, please apply.
Yeah, getting involved, internships, volunteering, it's super, super, super important. And she's right there. I have tons of classmates whose parents went to NYU. Their parents actually teach at NYU, but no one in my family is a dentist, right? So you have to pave the way. And I see a good question. How do you keep in touch with volunteering, internships, and shadowing? What sort of conversations is appropriate to have? For me, I would go, say it's a club or a professor, I would go talk to them. For dental clinics, I would look up as that, I think physical therapy student was talking about earlier. I would go to the office. Hey, here's my resume. Can I please shadow? Can I work? I would email, I would call. So they know, I never had an occurrence where they're upset or angry. Why is she reaching out? They like to see, oh, she's really interested. So that's definitely a way that you can have that conversation and get involved.
We've got just a couple more minutes, but I see that Destiny, you have another question.
Yeah, hi. So I asked about the reaching out, particularly, let's say you already were done with the internship. How do you keep in contact, especially if you're going to use them as a reference in the future?
Oh, I usually just wish everyone Happy New Year. It's my way to stay in contact with them, so that's the way. And then sometimes I also update them on what I've been doing. And I see one question on, can I help you out with the Arches app? I'm actually not allowed to because I also interview students. So you can go, if you have questions about the internship, I can answer that, but I can't read your essays since I'm one of the interviewers as well. So I'll let you know. And I usually update them like, oh, like I'm in my 3rd year now. This is what I'm doing. Hope you and your family are well. And that's how you can send them like updated emails.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did because I graduated, I had the gap year. So even for people who I needed to write my rec letters, I'd update, oh, how's your summer been? Or how, whatever, like I've been doing this. How are you? And I'd remember things about them. How's your daughter? Blah, blah, blah. So that's like a way to like email, keep in touch, and they appreciate that. And I see one more question. Yeah, your mentor can write you, at least I'm sure for med school, for dental school, they definitely can write you a letter of rec.
Yes, Zane. There is a recommended number of clinical hours. I believe it's 150 on the pre-health website, but you should, I echo what Dr. Heron said. If there are specific schools you are interested in, look to see what their requirements are, which might be different from the general information that is on the pre-health website, which is meant to be for everybody and not just for specific schools or interests. Thank you to our panelists for coming. Really appreciate it. Iman, this is not my Zoom space. So I don't know. I also I don't know what your major is either, so I don't want to overstep my boundaries, but if you don't mind, Iman, feel free to email me and then we can go from there if that is okay with you.
Well, I mean, the personal comment I wanted to say was, since I know I'll have to discuss with you about my, with advising in the near future, I just wanted to clarify now that my name is pronounced Iman and not Iman. I know Iman is I guess it's like what people in Saudi Arabia call my name. However, my name is pronounced Iman.
My apologies, Iman. Yes. Thank you for correcting me. If there are other questions you have for me, please feel free to email me.
I will make sure to do so, and I'm sorry for interrupting with just a minor concern.
That's okay.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Armand, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, Parisha. Thank you for coming, Rimsha. We really
Yeah.
appreciate you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this. Thank all of you for staying for this long. Goodness gracious, bless you all for staying this long. All of the resources will be emailed to you. I believe that's what Ms. Guzman said, as well as a recording of this video. And we hope to see some of you tomorrow. Have a good evening, y'all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Parisha. Bye, everyone.